Hello, everybody, and welcome to another fantastic episode of Truth Wanted. I am your host, as always, Objectively Dan. This is the live call-in show where we talk about what people believe and why, live every Fridays at 7 p.m. Central Time. Joining me this week is another special guest from Tinseltown. First one from Tinseltown, I think. Hopefully we'll get more, but it is John Lancie. John Lancie, welcome to Truth Wanted.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, and so some of you guys might be wondering, what's a guy like John Lancie doing on Truth Wanted? Well, in case you're not familiar, John Lancie is an actor. He has been acting for longer than I've been alive, but he's probably most famously known for his role as Q in Star Trek: The Next Generation, amongst other projects, including Breaking Bad, which is pretty cool. But John is a bit of a secular activist, I would say, right?
I would say that, especially now that the times need it more.
Yeah, and so most recently you did a speech for the Secular Student Alliance conference this summer, which I did not get to attend, but I'm kind of jealous that I didn't get to see it, but I get to talk to you now, which is pretty cool. And you've been talking at secular events for a couple of years now, which is really neat. So I guess I just want to start off, like, have you always been kind of secular? Like, what's your story with religion and everything? How did you grow up?
My story with religion is pretty simple, and that is that I was never religious. I went to school, to a school that was a private school. Actually, before that, I went to a school which is, what is it? Where the kids are going to Sunday school.
Yeah.
That shows you how little I know. And I remember even at the time when they were talking about, Jonah living in a whale and things like that, all that stuff, that early stuff that you get. I just thought, it's just not possible. I mean, I just don't believe that people don't live in whales. So I just never bought it. And I mostly had a sense that I was being manipulated. And that never went away. So I, unlike a lot of people, yourself included, I never went down that road. And then when one became, 20 years old or 25 or 30 years old, felt betrayed and felt that they had been, told things that were essentially not true. And I never went down that road. I just was not interested in that kind of religious education. I'm very interested in the history of it. I find it fascinating. I probably know a lot more about Bible studies than most people do, but I'm not a believer in a God, any God. But I am certainly a believer in the humanistic elements of where a lot of religions feel that it's important to be kind and good to each other, to be charitable. I believe those are things that I ascribe to, but not religious elements.
So some humanistic values, some humanist values, maybe.
Absolutely.
Right. So, when I think of Hollywood, right? When I think of actors and actresses and people in that scene, I guess there's a reputation of some people believe it in some kind of crazy stuff, whether it's like Scientology, whether you're a big believer in Goop or whatever, Gwyneth Paltrow's thing. There's some kind of out there stuff. So like you've been around that world a little bit. Do you find that you're kind of the odd man out in that scene, or what's it kind of like?
I mean, the thing is this, is that I'm a working actor. I'm not an actor who has, I've achieved a certain amount of notoriety, but not at the level in which you're talking about. Most working actors, especially most working actors who come out of the theater, we're pretty conservative people. I mean, we show up on time. We do our work. We are perfectionists often in terms of making sure that it's done, as good as possible. Our profession has a lot to do with being practical And I know that's very contrary to the way in which people think about, well, there's the Charlie Sheens and the, whatever, Gwyneth Paltrow and what have you. But for the most part, most actors are working people. They're working people.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. That makes sense. Because, like, if you have something that's kind of wild and out there, that's probably going to get you more attention, right? And if you just are kind of whatever about it, I mean, nobody's going to pay attention to that, right? So I can see how maybe that kind of...
Well, also, the fact of the matter is that most people think of these things as being private. It's the... and for... So we just don't, most actors, certainly the actors that I know of, we don't talk about this stuff very often.
Yeah.
We are generally socially liberal, which is to say that, and that's because we have grown up with and work with many different types of people in a very diverse environment on many different stories. Where our job is to assume and to wonder what it would be like to be that person or that person or that person. So it begins to open you up a little bit. It makes you cognizant that there's another worldview than your own. But certainly most of the actors that I know of, a few of them who are very religious are not cramming it down my throat or anybody else's throat. And we just have good, regular conversations like most people do. And at the same time, you've got some wackadoodles.
Sure, yeah, but that's the perfect segue to my next question then, because past couple of years at least, from what I've seen, you've been doing the secular activism stuff. You've been talking, giving speeches. So what got you inspired to do that?
What got me inspired to do that is that I got hired to do a job called, which was to go around the country with the Scopes monkey trial, the actual trial transcripts to the Scopes monkey trial. Ed Asner played William Jennings Bryan, and I played Darrow. And we did the college circuit, and those colleges have major theaters all around the country, and it's a great circuit to be on. And I thought that I was doing a show which was essentially like a historical show. It was a trial that took place in 1925. It was the first trial ever to be broadcast on radio. It was about evolution, which, as far as I'm concerned, is a non-issue. They carry on about the conspiracy or the fact that
John,
other people...
you'd be surprised with the people I talk to. It's still an issue for some people.
Yeah, I know. But to me at the time, this was all very sedate stuff.
Sure.
And so in any case, we go out on stage and we are performing the actual trial transcripts where it's, and there's a narrator who's explaining a little bit about what's going on right now. And then you would see scenes of it and what have you. And that's when we were hit with people in the audience screaming and yelling and carrying on. And most of them seemed to be, or at least the ones that I remember, it was all about, October 23rd, 4004 BC, which I had never heard about. Really? What's that? That's the day the world was created. Well, I now am fascinated because all of a sudden I'm playing to an audience who usually audiences are rather quiet and they laugh or they cry or they applaud, but that's about it. I had never played to audiences which are screaming at you.
Yeah.
And that was my introduction. And I at these colleges, we had to give lectures. So Ed would give a lecture at one college. He'd do a question and answer, and I would do one at the next college. And at this particular college, and it was in Nebraska, I finished the Q&A. There were about 100 kids, 120 kids in the classroom. I finished the Q&A, and I said, so thank you, and stuff like that. And the teacher went, thank you. He said, I saw the show last night, and I thought it was really great. How many of you saw it? and maybe about 3 or 4 kids raised their hands. Now, I'm supposed to be talking to a group of 150 kids at a major university who want to be actors. So, we got, excuse me, but there are a lot of like 9 or 10 really tip-top actors who performed last night. And if for no other reason than wanting to see the skill involved, you should have been there. But only 3 or 4 had gone. So I was like, oh, that's kind of strange, I'm thinking. And he saw that, and then he looked at me and he said, and he gave me one of these looks like, watch this. He said, listen, with a raise, putting your hands up in the air, how many of you believe the world was created October 23rd, 4004 BC at 10 o'clock in the morning? And about 80 out of 100 kids raised their hands.
Wow. And where was this at? This was in Texas.
This was at the University of Nebraska.
Nebraska. Excuse me. Okay. Yeah.
And I was shocked. It was shocking to me. And instead of going, God, what is so stupid? What does that mean? Oh my God. What happened is that I kind of looked down at my feet. I felt like the air had been pushed out of me. And mostly what happened is I went, oh my God, all the curiosity has just left the room. 500 years of curiosity, things that I wake up every day and look on the news going, oh, they discovered this, or they can see further into the universe, or somebody's discovered that frogs do, whatever. I just find, which I have found fascinating all my life, just simply went out the door.
Yeah.
When you kind of go, oh yeah, well, I don't know, 4004 BC, 10 o'clock in the morning, that's it. My world is set now. So I went back that night. I was going to, we had a show, and we were in the green room, and I'm talking to the rest of the actors. I'm telling them about this. And there was a girl there. There were a couple of college kids, very sweet, who, would help us set up and what have you. And there was one particular one from the night before who was very sweet. And let's call her Mary. And I said, oh, Mary, I told the story. And I said, Mary, would you have raised your hand? And she said, oh, yes, absolutely. And I said, why is that, Mary? And she said, well, because God is my bus driver.
What?
And I said, you know what, Mary, I don't know what is that supposed to mean? She said, it means that I can go to the back of my bus and party hardy because God is driving my bus.
Okay.
And I heard that as such an abdication of one's own personal responsibility coming from a 20-year-old who I thought, oh, no. And I have often thought about that Mary. Where is she now? Mary is, 40 years old now, or 35 years old. How many people have been driving her bus that she doesn't know about?
Yeah.
What have they been telling Mary, who is willing to just believe? Where is Mary now? So I began to get onto a circuit. The first place in which I spoke was at the Lincoln Memorial. There were, I don't know, 20 or 30,000 people there. And I spoke to them about that. And I said, we've got to be really concerned about this. It's not about believing. It's about kind of becoming dead upstairs in terms of what's going on. And you can be highly manipulated at that point. You can be told things that are not true. Intentionally not true, manipulated and controlled. And I don't mean like, some sort of Martian sort of way. I mean, just regular life.
Yeah.
So that's when I began to think, what can I do? And what I can do is to speak up.
Yeah, and all of what you're saying is really resonating with what we try to do here on Truth Wanted. Like, we want to question why people believe the things that they do, not because, I'm nosy, right? Or because, like, I'm really interested in what's making you tick, because real life is affected by the beliefs that you have, what you decide to do in your personal life, and how you set policies, whether that's for your community or for your nation. So I was pleasantly surprised when I found out that you were doing these talks and doing this kind of stuff, advocating for secularism. And recently you gave a talk about secular leadership to the Secular Student Alliance, which I thought was particularly interesting. Was there a particular reason why you wanted to talk about secular leadership for that conference, or?
Well, because my feeling is that those of you who are your age, who just left college, those who are going into college and what have you, you need to understand, my generation, even though I was at Woodstock, even though I was at Kent State, even though I spoke at the Senate and went into the White House to advocate about the Kent State killings and what have you, my generation, the generation that I am part of, has really done your generation a bad turn. We have let you down, seriously let you down. We have allowed stuff to take place that should not have taken place. The fact that whatever it is, 25, 27 little kids could be shot in a schoolroom and we didn't do anything about it. The fact that we have allowed, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, there's nothing about allowing this stuff, but I mean, all of this conspiracy stuff is bullshit, and it clouds one's ability to have critical thinking and also to understand what's going on. I have talked to people back when this was when was it? I don't know, 10 years ago, where somebody said to me, I want government out, keep government out of my Social Security. And you kind of go, that's really, you're not thinking.
Yeah.
And so it concerns me, this issue of believing, because people, it's a real easy way to just say, well, I believe. And that's sort of the end of the investigation.
Yeah, or just having faith. I just have faith that this is true.
I just have faith. And the thing is, we live in a much more complicated world than that. And people can take advantage of you really easily. And so it behooves you to spend the time to learn, to discover what's going on, not to only listen to one brand of quote news. And so it's all part and parcel. Critical thinking. It's all part and parcel of critical thinking.
Sure. Yeah, these kind of I just have faith, I just believe. These are the terminology that I've come to know them as. They're called thought terminating cliches, and that's what people who study this say. It's a word or just a phrase out there that's supposed to indicate, all right, well, this is just the way it is. And let's not think about it anymore and just leave it as it is, right?
Yeah, I grew up at a time where if somebody had a religious belief, you were not supposed to ask them. You were not supposed to challenge them. And you kind of went, and even though you might think, well, I don't know, I mean, that doesn't make sense. If you were to say something like that, that would be considered impolite. However, once you move from the private in your home, you can believe what you want to believe, into the public square, and then those people would say, you would say to them, well, wait a minute, could you explain that? Oh, wait a minute, you cannot say that to me. I believe you are impinging on my beliefs. You kind of go, no. You're in the public square now. So you have to explain, you have to prove.
Yeah. We can't make a policy on something. No, that's just how it is. Yeah, it's not a good way to run things. So I'm just happy to see that you're out there talking about this stuff, using your platform for, hey, critical thinking. I don't know. Nobody can knock you for using your platform for critical thinking. I mean, that's
I don't think so. I don't think so. And I'm not I mean, as I keep on saying, I have friends who are very religious, but fabulous critical thinkers. You know, they don't. So it isn't like just because you're religious you can't think critically. I'm talking about that zone in the that a little bit of the mindless zone, the 4004 BC zone,
right?
Where evidence over the years, that was a date that came up by Bishop Ussher back in 1653 or whatever it was, and we've moved on from there. So, get real.
Get real. I love it. Well, folks, if you're tuning in and you missed some of the first part, I'm talking to, of course, John de Lancie, famous for multiple roles, probably most known for Star Trek. And we're about to take some calls. So if you haven't already, go ahead and call that number on the screen, because we do have some calls lined up and we're going to take them in just a second. But John, I did have one more question before we started getting into that. And we already talked about it before the show, and I know this annoys you, but I figured we should nip this on the bud just in case anybody wants to call in about it. Obviously, there is this thing going around called QAnon, and you happen to be known for playing a character called Q. So, like, the jokes there are kind of obvious. I guess I just want to get your take on that, because that's probably got to be pretty frustrating for you.
No, it isn't frustrating. I think that it's a sad commentary on where we are. I'm happy to stay as far away from those folks as possible. And they don't represent me or the character that I played and made very popular. It's actually contrary to all of that.
Yeah.
And, so that's about it.
Yeah. I got to point out, because somebody made the comment when we were advertising you're going to be on the show. This is the closest that God will ever be on Truth Wanted. Somebody made that joke, and I just thought that was funny. So I wanted to share that with you. But we're going to get to some calls.